Hi, my name is Tasha Funderburg, and I'm excited to be here with you guys to learn more about the Screwtape Letters. I personally have never read this book before until Nathan had asked me, but I really want to encourage you guys to read it. It's an awesome book. It is really cool because it comes from the perspective of the enemy, and even though that's the case, we learn a lot about God and his character and his love for us. And so if you haven't picked it up yet, please do that. And I want to explain a little bit about my portion of the book. There's a term called undulation that is talked about, and this term is basically this up and down motion, kind of like a wave that moves up and down. And it's describing the way that our lives are. And in the book, Screwtape says, "This dryness and dullness through which your patient is now going are not, as you fondly suppose, your workmanship, but merely a natural phenomenon." So going through this up and down undulation type thing, these mountains and valley experiences, this is natural. And that was really helpful for me to understand personally. Now, you can experience this type of up and down in your normal life, so even in your preferences. Sometimes you really want like dark black coffee to drink, and you think that's like the only way to drink your coffee. And then a couple days later you decide, I really want a vanilla latte with lots of sugar. So it's like an up and down experience. And you also probably experience this in your relationship with God if you are someone who follows God. There are times when you feel really close to him, times when you can see him in nature, you can see him in people, you really want to read the word and are interested in it. And then there are also times when you feel very far from him, where you feel like he's nowhere to be found and you feel lost. So this up and down, these mountaintop and valley experiences are normal and natural. And that was helpful for me to understand, and I hope that it is for you too. And these experiences in the mountains and experiences in the valleys, you can see the physical happening of it in the Bible. I would encourage you to study it because it's really fascinating. But God is with his people when they're on the mountain, when they can see his face and experience him. For instance, when Moses receives the 10 Commandments, that happens on a mountain. And when Jesus gives the Sermon on the Mount, that happens on a mountain. But also we see God with his people in the valley. We see him with them when they're fighting their enemies. Okay, all over the Bible it talks about this. And I want to give you some ideas about what you can do when you're on the mountaintop, so to speak, and when you're in the valley. So when you are on the mountain, I want you to find a friend who's in the valley. And I want you to go and I want you to sit with them and I want you to listen. I don't want you to tell them why you made it to the mountain or how you got there. I don't want you to tell them all the things that they need to do to get out of the valley. I want you to be with them. This is something that Jesus does whenever he is with Mary and Martha after Lazarus dies. He's with them. He weeps with them. He is with them. And then eventually he does raise Lazarus back to life. But he is with Mary and Martha. And so I want you to find a friend who's in the valley when you're in a mountain. I don't want you to convince yourself that you are better or holier, or that now that you're on the mountain, you'll never have to go back to the valley. Because we know that this is an up and down experience. So in the book, it says, in his efforts, speaking about God, in God's efforts to get permanent possession of a soul, he relies on the troughs more than on the peaks. So we can see in this book, but also in the Bible, that God uses the valley. So sometimes we're in the mountain, and that's really great, and we're really close to God, but he relies on and uses the valley to refine us. And our enemy wants you to feel abandoned. He wants you to feel like God hates you when you're in the valley. But the truth is that his love is evident when you're in the valley. God is with you there. And so when you're in the valley, I want you to see some things, okay? So when you're in the valley, I want you to choose to change your posture. And in Psalm 121, I'm going to flip there for you, verse 1 through 2, it says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So in this psalm, we see the psalmist, he's lifting his eyes up to the hills. So in my head, I'm picturing he's probably in a valley, okay? He's lifting his eyes up and he's asking, where does my help come from? And then saying, my help comes from the Lord. When you're in the valley, I want you to go be alone with the Lord. Talk to him. Tell him why you're frustrated about being in the valley. communicate your feelings and your thoughts. And then I want you to actually stand. I want you to stand up, tilt your head up to the mountain per se. Tilt your head up to the heavens and say, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. I believe when you change your posture, when you're talking to the Lord, it actually really matters. And in the Screw Tape Letters, he talks about it too, how your posture is really important in prayer. But I want you to do that when you're in the valley. I also want you, when you're in the valley, to have hope. So it can be really easy to be tempted to think that you're going to be stuck there forever. It's easy to just think you need to sit and wait and sulk and just hang out there. But I want you to remember that you have hope in Jesus. If you're someone who follows him, he gives you hope. He died in your place for your sin and then rose again to bring you new life with God. This is new life here now on earth. It's also new life forever with God. So you can have hope in that he's going to be there with you in the valley, but you also have the hope that you get eternity with God. And in that period, there is no more valley. There's no more trial. There's no more suffering and pain. So there's hope in Jesus. And in Isaiah, it talks about God refining us in the valley. So he is not wasting this time that you have in the valley. He's using it to make him more like yourself, or more like himself. And also when we're in the valley, I want you to choose to obey. So my very favorite quote from the chapter that I got to read is this. It says, and remember, this is the enemy speaking. This is Screw Tape speaking, okay? Our cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring but still intending to do our enemy's will, looks around the universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished and asks why he has been forsaken and still obeys. And I hope that you'll choose to obey even when you're in the valley, because God is using you. He is shaping you and refining you when you're in the valley. But I hope that you'll choose to believe that he is still good and you'll obey him. And finally, my hope for those of you who aren't walking with God, so you don't trust him yet, I hope that through this you can see God's character. Our God does not ask people when they're in the valley to get over it. He comes there with you. So I hope that you can see the character of God is good and that he loves you and he cares about you and that he is with you there in the valley. And if you are somebody who follows God and you're on the mountain, humble yourself and be with somebody who's in the valley. And if you're a follower of God and you feel like you're in the valley, please don't despair. There is hope. I pray that and hope that you would choose to obey. I hope that you would choose to change your posture. I hope that you would choose to worship because God is good and he's using the valley.